Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Tuesday, November 24th, 2015. Here are our top stories.
Tonight.
Allah Akbar! Allah Akbar!
Turkey shoots down a Russian jet, and militants open fire on the ejected pilot. The world watches to see what will happen next. That's coming up.
Russian jets, for a maximum of 9 seconds, may have been flying directly with GPS guidance on the border between Syria and Turkey. Turkey has been injecting troops for almost 5 years, paramilitaries, al-Qaeda forces into Syria. Turkey is absolute.
Well, not since the 1950s has a NATO country shot down a Russian jet, but it happened today. This is something that has been building up to this kind of a climax for quite some time. We've had a lot of close calls. Look at some of these headlines in just the last month or so. October 22nd, Russian fighter jet has a close encounter with a drone. October the 7th, U.S. jet has a close call with a Russian fighter over Syria. October the 29th, U.S. jets intercept Russian planes near an aircraft carrier. We shouldn't be surprised to see this. We have American jets, we have Russian jets, we have Turkish jets, all flying over Syria. Now, of course, the Russians were invited by the Syrians. We weren't. And we all say that we're there to attack ISIS. But as Vladimir Putin pointed out, and I think as today's events show, that isn't the case, quite frankly. We need to understand that ISIS is a false flag. Not that it's a hoax. It's not a made-up hoax. They really are a threat. But they are a threat that we created, that we funded. And that's the genius of Matt Drudge, very succinctly saying today in a tweet, and of course it's his only tweet since he recently flushed his queue. He doesn't keep his tweets out there as a matter of record. But he said, a shocking truth is unfolding. America has been arming ISIS. Just hold that thought. America has been arming ISIS. That's the context in which you need to understand all of this. America has been arming ISIS. Turkey has been funding ISIS. They've been buying millions of dollars a day worth of ISIS's oil in these oil fields, pretending that somehow they don't know who's buying this. They don't know who's funding them. They don't know who's giving them the weapons. We're going to show you in the next segment. Alex Jones is going to come in and we're going to break down. We're actually going to show you a little bit of it in this segment, but we're also going to break it down in more detail in the next segment with Alex Jones. We're going to actually show you the missiles that the American armed terrorists used to shoot a search and rescue helicopter down today. First, let's take a look at the context of this and where this all happened. Of course, we see from a CNN Turkish English language version, they put out a flight path that came from the Turkish military. Now, the Turkish military is asserting, as you can see in that picture, that the flight path of that jet went over the very southern tip of Turkey. And as they say, it was a mere few seconds, a couple of seconds it was over there. That is the provocation to take this down, presumably. Now, the Russians replied with their own flight path that says, no, it was in Syrian territory the entire time. But of course, one of the things that is very disturbing and questioning about this is the fact that there's a private Turkish broadcaster, Haberturk TV. They just happened to be in the area, as well as Turkey's Anadolu agency. A couple of different Turkish news agencies were there. As one person tweeted out, Lindsay Hilsum tweeted out, how come a Turkish TV crew was in the right place, filming in the right direction as a Russian plane was shot down? Were they lucky or were they tipped off? Now, when the shoe is on the other foot, as Mikhail Thalen pointed out today in an article on Infowars.com, the Turkish Prime Minister then, Erdogan, who is also still the Prime Minister, said that a short-term border violation can never be used as a pretext for an attack. Now, when that happened, you had a Turkish jet shot down over Syrian territory. Today, they're saying that a Russian jet, which is essentially helping Syria, was shot down over Turkish territory. But of course, there was no reason at all for the Turkish jet to be in Syrian territory. They were not invited. They were not there to combat ISIS, as we all know. Yet this has been building for quite some time. As I mentioned at the beginning, We've had several close calls with American and Russian planes already, in spite of the fact that we have American politicians beating the drums, both Obama and Hillary on the Democrat side and virtually the entire GOP field, as well as most GOP congressmen, beating the drums for a no-fly zone, for a confrontation between the U.S. and Russia. There have been some issues just in this last month with Turkey and Russia. Look at this article. NATO rejects Russian explanation of Turkish airspace. They point out that, and this was just back on October the 6th, again, about 7 weeks ago, NATO at that time rejected Moscow's explanation that its warplanes had violated alliance member Turkey's airspace by mistake. Erdogan said he was losing patience with Russian violations of his country's airspace. He said an attack on Turkey means an attack on NATO. Russian Defense Ministry had said that the Su-30 warplane that had entered Turkish airspace along the border with Syria for a few seconds on Saturday, a mistake was caused by bad weather. The MiG-29 locked its radar on the Turkish patrol for 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and a Syrian-based missile system locked onto them for 4 minutes and 15 seconds, the Turkish military said. So you understand the situation here is that they've got incursions from both sides slightly over the border for mere seconds. And of course, these are jet planes flying very fast. The borders don't have lines on them, folks. But this is what comes out of this kind of brinksmanship. And understand the overall context is that the United States and Arab allies are flying into Syria and bombing Syrian government positions, saying that sometimes they're fighting ISIS, but of course, ISIS continues to thrive unexpectedly. Now today, as this plane was shot down and as the pilots ejected and were parachuting down, they were shot. Presumably, at least one of them was killed. We don't know about both of them, but we have seen footage of one of the pilots dead. They were shot while they were parachuting down, and then as a search and rescue helicopter approached, it was shot with a TOW missile system, and the Syrian rebels chanted Allah Akbar. These are the moderate rebels. These are our allies, shouting Allah Akbar, shooting an emergency search and rescue helicopter, shooting pilots in violation of Geneva Convention who have bailed out of their plane, shooting them as they're parachuting down. Those are our allies. And if you have any question about this, take a look at this footage. Of course, when CNN shows the footage, they only show the helicopters searching for the downed pilots. They don't show them being shot down with this U.S.-made TOW missile system. But we will show that to you as well as the English sign on it saying what make and model it is. And as you can see, it says Traversing Unit Guided Missile Launcher M83. And then it says NO column, that'd be number 208520.
Отсюда и большая денежная подпитка бандформирования.
And certainly these military groups get their financing from. And now they stab us in the back, they hit our planes that are fighting terrorism.
Vladimir Putin's reaction to this is that he feels that he's been stabbed in the back by the accomplices of terrorists. Would you say these people are terrorists? If they shoot pilots who are parachuted out of their plane trying to get to safety, if they shoot a search and rescue helicopter, if they shout Allah Akbar, and if they do it with American-made weapons, are we accomplices to terrorists? I would say that we are. What about the reactions of our presidential candidates? Of course, back at the beginning of October, we had Carly Fiorina saying the U.S. must be ready to use force against Russians in Syria. She said the U.S. must be prepared to shoot down Russian jets in Syria if that's what it takes to protect U.S.-backed rebels fighting Assad. You know, like those rebels we just saw shooting the search and rescue helicopter. She says this is a tricky maneuver. It is a dangerous maneuver, but it's a maneuver we must undertake because we must make it crystal clear to Russia that they do not get to move into the Middle East and become the dominant outside power. Yeah, the dominant outside power in the Middle East is going to be us, whether we're invited or wanted or not, and regardless of whether or not our policies create more conflict than they solve. But of course, that's the whole point, isn't it? She says, yeah, this is going to be difficult to do, but we're going to do it. You realize now, as we've seen a plane get shot down, just how insane this is. But what are the reactions today from the candidates? Well, if you look at the Twitter accounts of most of these candidates, what you'll see is essentially crickets. Absolutely nothing but silence. Take a look at Donald Trump's site. Nothing at all there about it, just as we were going to air. If you look at Jeb Bush, for example, he's talking about the peachoid is still standing. Thanks for saving it. So this is somewhere evidently maybe in Georgia. I don't know, Gaffney, Georgia or something, but, you know, it doesn't have anything to do. You wouldn't think that something serious was happening in the world because Jeb Bush is talking about the peachoid. The one person who talks about it is Rand Paul. Tweets about it. First of all, he said the shooting down of a Russian fighter jet illustrates precisely why we need open lines of communication with Russia. Remember, Carly said we shouldn't even talk to Putin. I'm not even going to talk to him. I wouldn't give that guy the time of day, just kind of like she's pouting or something. Unbelievably idiotic and childish. And then he goes on to say those calling for a no-fly zone need to realize that shooting down other countries' fighter jets will be the result, and war will be a possibility.
We need to have a no-fly zone. We need to have a buffer zone for refugees. We need to provide.
No, I know that, Senator,
help.
but they're attacking the very guys who we want to see topple Assad. You would let American planes just continue to pass them and let them do that?
No, but I might do what we did in Afghanistan many years ago to give those guys the ability to shoot down those planes. That equipment is available.
Who would be shooting them down?
The Free Syrian Army.
And then finally, he says, we should resist calls from some presidential candidates to isolate ourselves from discussions with our adversaries. And that may be why, in the top tweet that he had there, as I screenshotted this, in the new Iowa poll, he's moved into 5th place, ahead of Jeb, ahead of Carly, and ahead of many other warmongers. And here's what he had to say way back in mid-October.
I think a no-fly zone is actually the dumbest idea I've heard of all the candidates. And you have Hillary Clinton on one side promoting it, and you have 5 or 6 Republicans promoting a no-fly zone. This would be a no-fly zone in an airspace where Russia's already flying. It would be a recipe for disaster. It's probably a recipe for World War III.
Yeah, Rand said a no-fly zone may be the dumbest idea ever, but the dumbest candidate ever, perhaps, Ben Carson, had this to say about no-fly zones.
We have to cut off their money supplies, don't allow them to transfer money through the system, cut off their oil, take their revenue source. We have to utilize our special ops people.
So his prescription is that we have to cut off their money supply. And he said this last night to Megyn Kelly. He said, maybe we need to send in our special ops people to blow up their oil wells. Well, you know who's buying their oil? Turkey, our ally, the people who shot down a Russian jet today. And then he said this about what's going to happen domestically.
Over here, we also must strengthen the TSA. You saw how many things got through there the other week. And the FBI, we got to give them much greater capacity to follow people 24/7.
That's precisely why I say we have to understand that ISIS is a false flag. Not that they don't exist, not that they aren't dangerous. We've made them very dangerous. We've created them, equipped them, trained them, continue to fund them. But we also have to understand that, like a false flag, they're going to be used to take our liberties. He wants to ramp up TSA. He wants to follow everybody more detailed. Ben Carson may be the most cavalier, profoundly ignorant, and provocative candidate I have ever seen. And he is trying to, out of his ignorance, if he truly is that ignorant, he is trying to provoke warfare. Look at this article from Breitbart. This is another quote from Carson. He said, if they do come into that area, after you've given them adequate warning, after we've talked to Putin, you shoot them down. Absolutely. Whatever happens next, we will deal with it. Yeah, that's a tough guy. You know, that's he's got to sound tough, but the sad part of it is that candidates like Carson, candidates like Carly Fiorina, candidates like Marco Rubio really will push for this, because this is what the military-industrial complex wants. In the show, where we're going to be interviewing after Alex Jones comes in, the next segment, we're going to be talking to Joel Skousen, and he's going to break down the long-term plans of the globalists. But I want to end with this last quote here. And of course, this is from the New York Times, talking about how GOP candidates, and of course, they don't include Hillary, but Hillary should be included in that. GOP candidates and Hillary are leading the charge in the call for a Syrian no-fly zone. And the New York Times breaks down where the candidates stand. As you can see at the top there, they show those who support a no-fly zone. That's most of the GOP candidates and Hillary. Those who oppose it, O'Malley, Paul, and Sanders. Ted Cruz and Trump, they put down as no position, but they put down some quotes from these people. Let me just read you some of these, because they're absolutely insane. Jeb Bush, enforce that no-fly zone. We'll stop the regime's bombing raids that kill helpless children. totally idiotic. You have to understand what's going on. We need to stand our ground, says Ben Carson, with the airspace. I would establish a no-fly zone along the border with Turkey. In no way would I back off. Chris Christie, my first phone call would be to Vladimir, and I'd say to him, listen, we're enforcing this no-fly zone. Hillary, I personally would be advocating now for a no-fly zone, a humanitarian corridors to try to stop the carnage on the ground and from the air. Yeah, because, you know, when we draw a line in the air and we start shooting jets down left and right, that's a humanitarian cordoning of that area. Then finally, let's end with Marco Rubio. Today, they point out on CNN, Rubio, who has been a proponent of more military spending, spoke about the situation in Turkey on Fox News on Tuesday today, saying that despite concerns about the direction Turkey's been going, the country is still a NATO ally and the U.S. must come to its defense. So here they are, having been wrong and having been provocative, having established and funded ISIS. Now he wants to say, hey, and if anything happens, we can come to the aid of Turkey because they're part of NATO. Let's just have a giant war. Precisely. Stay with us when we come back. We're going to take a detailed look, and we're going to have Alex Jones joining us to look at that TOW missile that shot down the helicopter, and then we'll be talking to Joel Skousen.
Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar wallahi alhamd. احتراق طائرة.
There you go. That's footage of our moderate rebel allies shooting a search and rescue helicopter, trying to help the pilots there. When CNN shows this, they show the helicopters searching around, but they don't show it being shot. We're going to show you, as we just did, them being shot, and we even will show you down to the serial and model number that is on this. That's what we're seeing on this footage, Alex.
It's just crazy. Turkey has been running the main war with ISIS. Wesley Clark will play a clip in a little while. It was on CNN earlier today. I'm just walking through the office. It's on. He's admitting it. So I saw it on screen. And then I turned it on, and there he was saying it, and I backed it up and saved it.
General, are you suggesting that Vladimir Putin had a point then when he suggested that Turkey, in a way, was aiding ISIS?
Well, all along, there's always been the idea that Turkey was supporting ISIS in some way. We know they've funneled people going through Turkey to ISIS. Someone's buying that oil that ISIS is selling. It's going through somewhere. It looks to me like it's probably going through Turkey.
It's just crazy. So ISIS, for 5 years under the name al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, are the moderate rebels, and then they're attacking, and then you've got a U.S.-made TOW missile with them putting it together. They just killed the pilots. They had shot the pilot and the bombardier, the navigator as they're called, as they parachute down. There's footage of that. And they get to the ground. Then they go stage them out in the field, 1.5 miles on the Syrian side where the plane crashed. Yeah. Near there. The helicopters come, they land to get the dead bodies, and they blow it up with a U.S.-made anti-tank missile. There's so many angles to this. And by the way, the mainstream media admits U.S.-made TOW missile because they even show the serial number, a traversing unit guided missile launcher, M83, pound 208520. And that takes us back to Benghazi. Thousands of surface-to-air missiles, thousands of ground-to-ground anti-tank missiles, U.S.-made, French-made, German-made, that were in caches Gaddafi had, that was given to the al-Qaeda forces that ran that attack in Benghazi. They had signs on TV saying, Syria, you're next. They then jihadied on out of North Africa, into the Middle East, into Iraq, and then infiltrated right in to Syria, breaking the country in two. And Turkey's on record with their artillery, attacking, helping bring in the rebels, helping bring in the forces from the Turkish side, not just the Iraq side. And then the Russians have been flying to the edge of their airspace because they've got to get reconnaissance on where the terrorists are coming in. And then they're there shooting down their aircraft. But that's the big red herring. Okay, the aircraft you can debate back and forth, and CNN's like, and guess what? Turkey's so mad after they've been wronged, killing the Russians, flipping reality, that they're going to complain to the Security Council, and Russia's in big trouble. There's a lot of outrage on CNN and Fox right now about the horrible Russians. But that's not the issue. You cannot debate that they're a mile and a half away with a TOW missile in Turkey, admittedly, shooting across as they do every day, where they can't be shot back yet, or the Turks will call it war, when they're Turkish armed, Turkish controlled, U.S. armed, shooting over here, blowing up the search and rescue helicopter. And Russia, I'm sorry, is not good at propaganda.
Yeah.
And all propaganda means is information promoting your ideal. You know, I'm Second Amendment promoter. That's propaganda. It's not a dirty word. Russia isn't even talking about this helicopter. The issue is, here are terrorists on the Turkish side of the border blowing up the helicopter with a U.S.-made weapon. And as Putin did properly point out in a speech he gave, saying we've been stabbed in the back by people that are associates of the terrorist or who are abetting the terrorist.
Отсюда и большая денежная подпитка бандформирования.
And certainly these military groups get their financing from. And now they stab us in the back, they hit our planes that are fighting terrorism.
Yeah,
he did say
accomplices. And that was a great move, I thought. That pointed out exactly what's going on here. People can see that these are terrorists. I mean, they're shooting people who are parachuting out of a plane, no longer combatants, and under rules of war, you wouldn't do that. Then shooting up a search and rescue helicopter to help them. Just as we saw in Kunduz in Afghanistan, we had U.S. forces attack a hospital for a half hour.
Yes.
Machine gunning and targeting doctors as they're running out of the hospital.
That's right. And then Putin goes further in that little short clip that you played earlier, and he says, look, Turkey, you've bought $800 million worth of oil on record.
Yes.
So everybody wants to act like the whole world isn't ganging up on Syria. And then Russia is, quite frankly, on the side of right, going in to defend against what's happening. We hear all this talk about Assad's used terrorist tactics. Look, a lot of bad stuff happens in war. I'm not defending everything Assad's done, but he's pretty darn good in that region. Okay, even better than like a Hosni Mubarak, who was our ally, who we overthrew, to put the jihadis in. But Syria didn't attack anybody. They were democratizing. The West has been doing this for 5 years. They started the fight. So under common sense, common law, when you attack first for no reason, you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
If I get dirty in the fight to survive, I'm not judged at the same standard because I didn't initiate the response.
Yes.
And so this is escalating. It's why we're making a big deal about it. We kept saying if a plane gets shot down, if U.S. troops get killed or are being used as human shields that have been put in there to help the jihadis, it's going to escalate. And now Russia says they plan to have major responses to this. David, other points?
Well, of course, you're talking about Syria and Assad not being a good guy, but he wasn't invading anybody like our close ally Saudi Arabia invaded Yemen. Okay, they're invading Yemen. Nobody is talking about that in the Western press. It's absolutely
since
amazing.
When is invading people that haven't done something to you a serious hardcore tyranny?
Yeah, yeah. And of course, they cut off the heads of more people in their own country for various crimes than ISIS has decapitated people. I mean, that's our close ally that's running this.
The Saudi Arabian regime are the villains.
I think it's also important to look at these people who were shouting Allah Akbar, taking the photographs of the pilots, the pilot who was dead. These are Syrian Turkmen. Now, those are people who supposedly are of Turkish origin that have been living in Syria for quite some time. But they could very easily be Turkish agents who are coming in here. We need to understand that Turkey has got a lot of dogs in this fight. They want to go after the Kurds that are on their southern border, and you can see ISIS just moving in from Turkey. It looks like an invasion force that is proceeding straight out of Turkey, Alex.
It is. That's the CFR 2 years ago said why we need Al-Qaeda. The whole thing's admitted. It's just the public is not academic enough or informed enough. They're so ignorant that they don't even know the players. I mean, I've heard people going, we got to go after Iran because of ISIS. You know, they just have no idea who the players are. And this is a major deficit. The people perish for lack of knowledge.
And if we don't get them to understand what's going on, this is going to be used in the same way that 9/11 was. They're going to fall for all the ramping up of the TSA, as Ben Carson is calling for, saying we got to send in boots on the ground, special forces to blow up the oil fields when it's our own ally, Turkey, buying it up. I mean, they're the major customers. Like, just pick up the phone and say, don't do that. You don't have to send in special forces.
Well, the truth is, these guys all work for the globalists.
Exactly.
George Soros is involved up to his eyeballs as usual. And I had a caller today, who pointed it all out. And he was absolutely right. This is moving towards a major regional war like Korea, like Vietnam, where we don't use nukes, but it's a major proxy war and hundreds of thousands die, if not millions, like Vietnam or Korea. And then there'll be all the wartime restrictions here at home. Look at Hollande, look at Merkel, look at suspending free speech, martial law in France and basically Germany, all out of them opening the borders, bringing people in, and then they're not held accountable for causing the climate that's allowed them to power grab.
Yeah.
So that's the bottom line here is the globalists are running this sickening situation.
Total chaos here domestically. They want to make sure that they bring in a fifth column into the United States. They want to ramp up the police state industrial complex. At the same time, they keep the war on terror industrial complex, bring back the Cold War, and then also have another Vietnam War in the Middle East. That's precisely what, and we have to get people to understand this or they will fall for it hook, line, and sinker out of fear.
And there'll be trillions and trillions in no-bid weapons contracts.
Yeah.
And just all sorts of carnage. It's a conquest-based economy instead of a renaissance-based economy. A conquest-based economy is controlled by those that create the crises and manage it versus the free market economy that's a renaissance based on free association, the best products, the best ideas, and building up society. David, I'm going to let you get back to the news after the break. I want you to have a great Thanksgiving with your family.
Thank you.
And just say great job to the crew. And don't forget, free shipping this whole week at InfoWarsStore.com. Help fund the Info War. Help join the fight.
Now, to understand how we're being played on this, we need to see the big picture, the big geopolitical picture. Of course, Wesley Clark clued us in on it, intentionally or unintentionally. He talked about the number of nations that they had planned to take down in the Middle East. Fleshing this out, talking about the players, talking about their goals, and talking about how we've seen this developing for quite some time. Joining us now is Joel Skousen. He is the chief editor and founder of World Affairs Brief. It's a weekly news analysis service. Of course, he is also an expert on preparedness. He's written Strategic Location. Where and how should you prepare when things really do hit the fan? And of course, that's always our concern as we see the increasing move towards not only globalism, but to establish that by creating chaos out of all that. So joining us now is Joel Skousen of joelskousen.com. Well, Joel, thank you for joining us. We've talked about the reactions of Putin, of Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey. We've talked about what the presidential candidates have said in the past about no-fly zones, how they're reacting to this. What's your immediate reaction to what happened today?
This is a dangerous move by Turkey because Russia certainly cannot let this stand as is. Now, they have moved a maritime missile ship into the coastal areas, claiming that they're going to defend the airspace against such incursions in the future. But I don't think that's going to hack it. It's too far away from where this happened. It would take too long for the missile to react to such a thing. I don't think anything's going to work for Russia except to put air defense aircraft up there as fighter defense, fighter cover for these attack aircraft. The Su-24 is a two-man crew, pilot and weapons officer. It's no match for the F-16. I have Air Force contacts who tell me that the Turkish pilots aren't that good. They don't do well, even though they're trained in the United States. But they're flying a top-of-the-line weapons platform. The missiles that the U.S. uses in its air-to-air engagements is top of the line. And so that's going to be tough for Russia to counter without a similar aircraft and missiles up there. And frankly, I think if this happens again, that's exactly what we're going to see.
Well, we've seen some of the more warmongering neocon candidates like Marco Rubio double down and say, Russia better not do anything because that would be an attack on a NATO country and we would be all in on that. So there we go. There's a reaction from the warmongering side.
Well, I don't think either side is ready for war yet. And yet Russia can get away with defending its aircraft in the area. As Justin Raimundo said, here's an aircraft who's bombing a terrorist target. I mean, there's no danger to Turkey. It wasn't an invasion of Turkey. What's going on? And Turkey claims, well, maybe we really didn't know it was a Russian aircraft. Of course, that isn't true. They know where all the U.S. aircraft are, and the only other aircraft are Syrian and Russian aircraft. They have shot down a Syrian attack fighter before, but clearly I think that they knew that this was Russian. There was a similar incursion a month ago, and they did warn Russia about that. I frankly am a little bit surprised because, you know, Turkey really doesn't want to go up against Russia in a war situation. And it would take NATO a tremendous amount of time to get into a position where they could really defend Turkey should Russia go after them. I don't think it's going to amount to that, nor do I think it's going to get to World War III. But I think Russia's going to do something more than just station a missile ship off of the coast. As I say, I think we're going to see some Russian fighter aircraft flying fighter cover over this. And then the Turks, I think, are going to think twice about trying to shoot at one of these aircraft again.
Well, you know, it's interesting, too, that you would say that, because Putin's reaction was not, we're going to take a recrimination against Turkey. What he said was, we were stabbed in the back. That's the headlines that you're seeing everywhere. But we were stabbed in the back by people who are accomplices to terrorism. That's what you're not seeing in the headlines. Accomplices to terrorism. And I think that's the point that Putin and the Russians have been making all along. We're there to do a job that you said that you wanted to do, but you're secretly arming, equipping, creating these terrorists.
Yes, and Turkey is the main puppet character for Russia, or for the United States in this. For example, The Guardian last week came out with an extensive article about how Turkey has been allowing all of this oil smuggling to come in through its border. That means that they're taking it to their marketing terminals, they're downloading the oil, they're marketing the oil for ISIS. This is a tremendous thing. The Guardian also pointed out that when they had captured, or when U.S. intelligence had gone in and captured one of the camps, ISIS camps in Raqqa, their headquarters, they found significant evidence of collusion directly between ISIS commanders and Turkish officials. And so it's even admitted by U.S. intelligence that there is collusion there. Now, that portion of U.S. intelligence has to be ignorant of the fact that the U.S. is, in fact, running the show. ISIS was a U.S.-British intelligence creation in order to get back into Syria after John Kerry's problematic remarks at a London press conference got a chemical weapons agreement offered to Syria, and Syria took it, and that stopped the fighting. It stopped the takedown of Syria that the U.S. was planning through a so-called no-fly zone 3 years ago. ISIS is, in fact, the reaction to that, an excuse to get back into it. And that's why the U.S. is not serious about taking down ISIS. The only reason that they attacked the oil convoys 2 days ago was because the Russians, Putin in the G20 meeting, showed satellite photos of all these depots and says, why aren't the U.S. attacking these things? Are they supporting terror? Of course they are.
Yes.
And they did an attack.
And of course, we played a clip earlier in the show from Ben Carson, where he was talking about reacting to this situation. And he said, what we have to do is we have to cut off ISIS's funding. So we need to use special forces to go in and shut down the oil fields. I mean, totally ignoring the fact that our NATO ally, Turkey, is the biggest customer of ISIS, just as you're pointing out. They got massive convoys. They're buying millions of dollars worth of oil a day from these ISIS oil fields. We can't even pick up the phone and tell our NATO ally to stop doing that. That's the blatant, in-your-face hypocrisy. And yet we have GOP candidates, along with Hillary Clinton, just playing along with all this as if ISIS isn't our creation, as if we're not funding them, as if we're not buying their products to keep them going.
You know, it's a very difficult subject for someone to broach the subject of a direct conspiracy of the United States to create a terrorist force. I mean, that is anathema to the media. It's anathema to any mainline or even conservative Republican candidates. They know they're going to get crucified if they try to make that statement.
Yes.
And there is a lot of evidence. I mean, look at the video evidence the Iraqis have of U.S. helicopters resupplying ISIS during the Battle of Mosul. Look at the videos of Apache helicopter accompanying a convoy of some 75 to 80 Toyota Hilux trucks. Now, of course, the U.S. will say, well, those were given to moderates and somehow they got into the hands of ISIS. But anybody who's buying that really needs to be in the market for the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah, the moderates that we have videotaped today of shooting the parachuting pilots out of their crashing and burning plane, shouting Allah Akbar over their dead bodies, and then blowing up search and rescue helicopters with American-made missiles. Those are our moderate rebels that were helping there. I guess one of the things that really concerns me so much is the reactions. I'm more concerned about what we have seen from American presidential candidates than the reaction that we've seen from President Putin with all this, because they're the ones who are egging this on, saying that, pretending that this doesn't exist in the form that it does, but then offering us very dangerous prescriptions. As Ben Carson said, we're going to have to, domestically, we're going to have to really ramp up the TSA. We're going to have to make sure the FBI has 24/7 surveillance on everybody. That's his prescription. And we're going to get more of that. We're going to get no-fly zones in the face of the Russians to trigger a real event between the U.S. and Russia that could trigger at some point in time World War III. That's, I think, the real danger, ignoring the cause of this and then offering these authoritarian empire-building prescriptions that are so detached from reality.
Well, that's one thing I'm very disturbed about. Even, people like Ted Cruz, who has got a legitimate conservative background going back decades, still has bought into the neocon agenda, unawares that it is a globalist agenda, that this is a phony war on terror.
Yes.
And it seems like the Republicans have to show who's going to be the strongest to stand up in the face of terror.
Hang on, Joel. We got to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about the levels of support as well as what's going on. Let's break this down for people, because we can stop this if we break this down. We'll be right back with Joel Skousen. Welcome back. We're talking to Joel Skousen about the shooting of the Russian jet over supposedly Turkey, although that's not clear whether it was in Turkish airspace or Syrian airspace. We want to break down really what's going on. And this is very important, because I believe we can really turn this back, Joel. I think we did in 2013 when they had the sarin gas attack. We were told by the U.S. media and by the U.S. government that that could have only come from the Syrian government. And nevertheless, as time went on and we talked about how this could possibly be a false flag, we started exposing this, even though the mainstream political candidates, mainstream press would not touch this. We eventually were able to say that, look, this could have come and possibly did come from the rebel forces that were there. We even had the U.S. military eventually weigh in on that and talk about that. So we turned that back once before. I think we can again if we expose this. Talk to us about the long-term interests of the U.S. and the globalists, why they're there.
It really has to do with Iran. And that's what your listeners really have to understand. The U.S., as a globalist agenda, was out to take down Iran starting in 2004, and Israel had been tasked to do that, to initiate the attack. Iran was expected then to retaliate against U.S. forces in the area, and that would then bring the U.S. into it. They didn't intend to occupy Iran, but they did intend to obliterate its military infrastructure. What's the reason? Iran is the only Muslim country that is actively attempting to be totally self-sufficient, building their own weapon systems, and the globalists can't allow that. They've always wanted the Arabs and the Muslims to be cannon fodder ever since World War II, Lawrence of Arabia, all the betrayal of the Arab promises that they made. They want the Arabs controlled and the Muslims controlled. And so that's the main target. But Israel, about 3 years ago, said to the U.S., look, we don't want to touch Iran until you get rid of Syria first, because Syria's got all this retaliatory missile capacity. And that's why the U.S. started to conjure up a no-fly zone like in Libya. It wasn't a real true no-fly zone. It was a cover, as it was in Libya, for cruise missiles going in, for special forces going in to accelerate and take down a nation. But as I said previously on the show, that got waylaid by a mistaken remark, an offhanded remark by Kerry at a London press conference when a reporter said, hey, is there any way that Syria can avoid this obvious attack? And Kerry just offhandedly said, yeah, they could give up their chemical weapons and we wouldn't attack. And wham, Syria said, we accept. And Russia said, we accept on behalf of Syria. And so Kerry must have really got a scolding when he got off the stage. You know, you fool, you just ruined our agenda. And that's why the U.S. and British intelligence had to create ISIS as an excuse for two reasons, not only to get back into Syria, but also to gin up the war on terror, to revitalize the war on terror. Everybody was getting tired of everyone claiming to be Al-Qaeda and never winning the war on terror. So they wanted a bigger, badder enemy, and that's what Al-Qaeda or ISIS became. Actually, what they did is simply go to about half of the rebels that they'd been training in Syria and said, okay, you're now ISIS. It was a name change, just like the name change to Free Syrian Army or the Syrian Democratic army that just was formed 2 weeks ago. These are just name changes. This is not real.
It's the CIA's corporate merger, a company merger, right? Amongst these different forces, yeah.
But you know, think about it. If Muslims were really trying to create a world caliphate, I mean, every single video that they've created has no other purpose but to create horror and revulsion against themselves. I mean, that's no way to start a Muslim caliphate. That's no way to rule the world, and everybody knows it. This is simply a propaganda film series, too high of video quality, by the way, for true terrorists. And incidentally, every one of these video confessions, whether it's the Paris attacks or all of the beheadings, every one of them comes through a government-connected website called SITE, run by Rita Katz, an Israeli citizen. And it's clear. I mean, why would the terrorists, knowing what NSA powers are to track, try to contact a government-connected site to make all of their confessions? It's unexplainable, except for the fact that these are operatives working for U.S. and British intelligence.
Yes, and we know when we look at the different groups that have been brought in here. I mean, there was a New York Times article where they talked to one of the ISIS commanders, and he pointed out that he had been fighting the Russians in Chechnya as a surrogate for the CIA, and the CIA brought him into that area. I mean, it's an open secret. We see this so many times. We have the videos of the resupplies and dropping resupplies as they're fighting. So many different ways that we see this, and yet it's difficult to get the American public to really understand what's going on with this, just as it's difficult to get them to understand that there is the Arab community is not this monolithic entity any more than Islam is. So you've got these fighting factions of Islam who are fighting for control, and you've got different Arab groups, you've got different nation states. And I think it's very important for people to understand how involved the Saudis are with the CIA, how involved they are in this particular war. I think it's very interesting and telling, Joel, that we don't hear anything about what the Saudis are doing in Yemen. We don't hear any calls for relocating refugees from that area because there can't be any condemnation of Saudi Arabia's actions in invading Yemen.
In fact, Saudi Arabia is doing very poorly. They haven't been able to beat Yemen yet, and they've suffered some major defeats. It's also very telling that Israel, nor Saudis, nor the Bahrainis, nor the Qataris have received any attacks from ISIS. This is very clear indication that these people are viewed by ISIS as our benefactors. We don't attack our benefactors. Turkey has not received any attacks from ISIS. Only a two-way street in exchange of money, arms, and oil supplies.
And as you look at the map, you can see that ISIS looks like paint spilling out and melting down from northern Turkey down into Syria. I mean, it looks like an invasion coming from Syria if you look at the areas that they control. And of course, they're dripping down and controlling the other enemy of the Turks, and that is the Kurds there. Yeah.
Let me just go through the big picture, though, so that we can understand this. First of all, the globalist agenda in the Middle East is to take down Iran and all of its surrogates so that U.S. puppets controlled mostly by Israelis. And by the way, the Israelis are very much involved with this U.S. intelligence effort to create ISIS. They use Arab Israelis, some of the best trained spies in the world, by the Mossad to infiltrate and become leaders of most of these terrorist outfits. And that's how the command system works, from U.S. and British intelligence to the Israeli Mossad to the terrorist leaders. The individual terrorists don't know that their outfit is being run by the United States. But they do get warning before every one of these U.S. attacks. If it's on a building, clear out the building so the building is empty when it's attacked. If it's a training camp, the training camp is empty by the time it's attacked. And so you'll notice the French, the day after the Paris attacks, got all of their targeting from U.S. Sources. So they were basically an extension of the phony war on terror by the United States.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing. Even from the very first pictures that we had as they were rolling out the new brand of ISIS, and we saw them on the Toyota Hilux trucks. And I can remember Alex sitting here saying, why aren't they attacking them? I mean, you could have taken them all out with one A-10. It's absolutely amazing. And thank you so much for joining us, Joel Skousen. We really have to fight this. We really have to understand what the big picture is here, or we are going to absolutely be helpless. We are going to see this used to take away every last bit of freedom that we have in this country. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you, David.
It is very important to restate what we began this broadcast with, and that is a simple statement, as Matt Drudge put out Well, by the way, America has been arming ISIS for some time now. We need to understand that. We need to understand that Turkey has been funding ISIS by buying massive quantities of their oil, millions of dollars a day worth of oil from ISIS. If we don't understand that ISIS itself is a false flag like 9/11, then we are going to subject ourselves to the fear, the uncertainty that is going to be used to further subjugate us, to further destroy the rule of law and our rights as individuals. We will have a much broader, much deeper police state, just as Ben Carson was bragging about. That's his prescription. Of course, it's his prescription. He's being put up and promoted, just like Carly Fiorina. They're being put out there and promoted by Fox News because they toe the military-industrial complex party line even stronger than Fox News does. So they put them out there, even if they don't have a chance to win. They hope that they will move the debate in that direction, and of course they have. All of the GOP candidates, except for Rand Paul, and including Hillary Clinton, are all pushing for the fact that we have to go into this war. Well, that's it for tonight's news. Stay with us and track this as it develops. We've been telling you this for a long time. If you want to support our operation, please become a subscriber to Prison Planet TV. Your subscription, and you can do that for slightly over $5 a month just to try it out. If you want to get it for an entire year, that's less than $5 a month, but it helps to support our operation. Well, again, join us again tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Dave, my mind is going. I can feel it.